Good morning. Good Saturday morning. It's 11 a.m. We're on week 12. I'm excited to be here. I hope everyone else is doing great. I am blessed. I'm feeling really blessed. Okay, so we are here, and as usual, I want to remind you if you'd like to follow along, you can get the schedule on the Bible Web BibleRoom.org website, and that's right there. And this week we are we're finishing the book of Joshua, and we're doing the book of Judges. So I'm going to hop right in and move this over a little bit. Okay, so the graphic for the theme for this week for me has been this: the Spirit of the Lord came mightily. What that means to me is several times during this week's soundtrack, the things that were happened right after the Spirit of the Lord came upon someone, like in the case of Samson or Gideon or any of the other people who were being directed by God. And the main thing for me here for the theme for this week. Okay, so this is the image I came up with, right? So I wanted the hair to be like really dramatic. I couldn't get the AI thing to just do Samson's hair really long and not her hair. It kept doing this, but this is the epiphany that I came to, or what I realized, that it really wasn't Samson's hair that gave him strength. It was the Spirit of the Lord coming upon him that would give him strength. And in those instances where it said that he didn't have his strength, it was because the Lord had left him. And it just so happened when his hair got cut, the Lord also left him. But look at what he was doing at those times when his hair was cut and when his hair was short. Because even though it says that he was a judge, he was really not a good judge, or like one like Deborah who would sit at the gate and help people solve their disputes. Samson was really a selfish kind of guy. He was indulged in himself and what he wanted, but he was a person that the Lord would come upon and give him just extraordinary strength. So that was a key thing for me for this week. Now, my darling liked this picture better because it shows that his arms are stronger and it looked more like Samson. But in this picture, it's not about Samson. It's about what we think of when we think of Samson, which is his hair being his strength. But the hair isn't his strength. It was the Spirit of the Lord coming upon him that was his strength. But I left this picture in here because he really liked that one because of the muscles, I guess. Okay, so this is the pericope. These are the headings that came across for in the soundtrack this week. And we're starting with Joshua 21 through 24, and the Levitical cities and the farewell address, and Joshua dying. And so I'll just hop in and come back to that if I need to. And this is the second week with the different judges. So one of the things that stood out to me, a word that stood out to me, was this idea, region, Golan in Bashan. Now, if we remember, that was in Deuteronomy 4 and 42 when Moses designated that as one of the cities of refuge. It was a place that a person could go if they accidentally kill somebody, and they could go there, and they would have to kind of hurry up and get there because they would need to be there before the avenger of that person that was killed by mistake, before their avenger caught up with them. But if they made it to the city of refuge, then they could stay there and the avenger couldn't touch them. And they had to stay there until the high priest death, and then they could go back home. So this Golan in Bashan was one of those cities of refuge. And down here in Joshua 21:27, it reads like this: And unto the children of Gershon, of the families of the Levites, out of the other half tribe of Manasseh, they gave Golan in Bashan with her suburbs to be a city of refuge for the slayer, and Beesh Terah with her two suburbs, with her two cities. So this Golan word for me was really a word that we've heard a lot. So Golan Heights is a word that we hear even in today, in the words of today. We hear about the Golan Heights. And this picture up top here is an image of the western edge of Golan Heights overlooking the Sea of Galilee. So if you imagine the map of the area, the Sea of Galilee is up top, and then it is the Jordan River, and then the Dead Sea. So we're up in the northern region on the western edge of Golan overlooking the Sea of Galilee. So this is a picture that I found here, and this is the picture that is well, I guess I need to show you the picture. This is the picture I found here, and this is the picture that was reimagined. I thought that came out so good. Okay, so that led me down to just do some more research about Golan Heights. So I'm gonna see if I can pull this up, because what ended up happening for me is, let's see, how do I go? Let me see, maybe it will let me do it here. I'm gonna go new window and pull it up, because there was some very interesting stuff about Golan Heights in here that I really wanted to share. So let me see if I can get over there like super quick. I have to figure out a better way to do this in the future, but here we go. Okay, so that means I need to stop sharing this screen and share another screen. Okay. So I need to share right here. And share. And share. Right there. Okay, and it's this one. Okay. Golan Heights. You see, it's mentioned here. That's when it was created as a city of refuge. Then it is mentioned in Joshua, mentioned again. This king here is one of the kings that they fought when they were first crossing over into the promised land. Remember this Og, king of Bashan? He was one of the last of the Rephaim giants. Okay, so those are some other references. This is a very good like documentary that I looked at on YouTube. Very, very good, just to help me understand Golan Heights today, because it's still a thing today. Israel regained control of Golan Heights from Syria during the Six-Day War of 1967. It's called the Arab-Israeli War, or the Yom Kippur War. On Saturday, October 6th, 1973, a surprise attack when Israel was caught off guard by Egyptian forces crossing the Suez Canal and by Syrian forces crossing the Golan Heights. So that was people coming in from the north and people coming in from the south. This is called the Yom Kippur War. Now, we remember that Yom Kippur is the holiest day of the year in Judaism. It is the Day of Atonement. It is the one time a year when the high priest enters the Holy of Holies. It is the most sacred place within the tabernacle and ancient temples. The priest goes there once a year to offer sacrifices and clean the sanctuary for the sins of the people. That is a ritual described in Leviticus 6. Both Syria and Israel claim the Golan Heights as their own. It is the most hotly contested real estate on the planet. It's shaped like a ship. It's 40 miles long and 16 miles wide, so it's not that big. The area was important for travel in biblical days for the King's Highway route between Damascus and Egypt. And today, it provides 15% of Israel's water supply. So that helps us realize why, even now, that area is very disputed. And Israel is occupying it right now, but it's because it is a very strategic war area. And you can see that on the pictures I'm going to show you some pictures from different places, how it overlooks everything, so you can really see your enemies. And that YouTube video that I mentioned there, it really tells how the terrain of the land really helped Israel, who was a much smaller army, beat the Assyrians. They had many, many, many more tanks, but the way the land was built and the decisions they made, whether they were going to, fight or not fight, it was just so clear to me that there was a divine hand in that fight. Okay. So here's another. Let me make this bigger. Control. That a little better? Okay. Mount Hermon. Historically, Golan Heights did not include Mount Hermon. Today, the summit of Mount Hermon is described as the northern tip of Golan Heights. The Golan Heights and Mount Hermon specifically is said to be the location of the transfiguration of Jesus. And that is the references there. Now, the mountain isn't named, but it occurs 6 days after 6 days near Caesarea Philippi, which is at the base of Mount Hermon. And we'll see that on a map coming up. Some scholars believe Mount Hermon is a strong candidate for the Mount of Transfiguration rather than Mount Hermon. Mount Tabor, which is another traditional site, due to its proximity to the narrative, meaning how close it comes to what is described, and the height and its isolation, which is fitting for a divine encounter. This Mount Hermon is considered a northern marker of the promised land. We can look at Deuteronomy 3 and 8. And we took at that time out of the hand of the two kings of the Amorites the land from the river Arnon to Mount Hermon. So that is what I wanted to share there. Because we still today in the news hear about Golan Heights. So I did a little bit of a deep dive for that. Okay, so let's continue with this. That was the 1973 Yom Kippur War. So this is the map I was talking about. Okay, this is the northern part of Israel, right? We all know Nazareth, the birthplace of Jesus. We see this word a lot, Capernaum, in the New Testament. And this is the Caesarea Philippi, where at the base of Mount Hermon. So you can see how that could be a good guess for where the transfiguration of Jesus happened. So this little insert here is to help us realize the terrain. If this is the Sea of Galilee right here, so that means this is the blow up of this Golan Heights, this is the elevation difference. So you see how this would be a very strategic place when you are defending the area, because you can see for miles around up there. This is another aerial picture of the Golan Heights, and that would be this area here. And this is the southern end of the Sea of Galilee, and this is the flatlands that surround it. Thought that was a great picture. And I got this picture from the Logos Bible software. Caesarea Philippi, who do you say I am? That is one of the verses in Matthew where Jesus is asking them, who do men say I am? And then, they answered, well, sometimes they say you're John the Baptist or Elijah, or the answer that they gave him. And then they said, well, who do you say that I am? And that was in that story there. So the transfiguration, we're saying, may have happened at the foot of Mount Hermon in this city here, Caesarea Philippi. In the transfiguration, who was there was Peter, James, and John, and Moses and Elijah showed up. And remember the New Testament story where that is where Jesus renamed Simon to Peter. And Peter means rock. And in Matthew 16:21, Jesus turned to Peter and said, "Get away from me, Satan. You are a dangerous trap to me. You are seeing things merely from a human point of view, not from God's point of view." And we know that is when Jesus started telling them that he was going to die, that he had to suffer many things. And Peter was like, no, that's horrible. That shouldn't happen to you. And that's when Jesus told him this verse to get away from him, to get behind me, Satan, because he was looking at it from a human standpoint instead of the view from God actually completing his redemptive plan for us. Okay? So this was a great imagined picture, and it's like I'm imagining the transfiguration and Jesus, Elijah, and Moses having a staff meeting. I thought that just turned out great. That truly helps me bring that picture to life. Okay. Now, at the end of Joshua, when he is given his farewell speech, he releases the east of Jordan tribes. Remember, that was Gad and Reuben and the half tribe of Manasseh. He told them to go and return with their riches and to share it with their family. And in Joshua 24:15, it says that, and if you seem evil, and if it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, right here, choose you this day whom ye will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites, in whose land ye dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. That is a very familiar verse to me. And so I really wanted to make sure I highlighted that. So another thing that I wanted to highlight is the altar dispute. Now, when they got to that other side, when they crossed back over to the east side of the Jordan, and they thought that they would create this replica of the altar. And their brothers and sisters on the west side of the Jordan were like, y'all can't do that because we're supposed to only worship in Shiloh where the tabernacle is. And so they actually it almost started a civil war between them. But before they started fighting, they sent a delegation of 10 of the other Israelites, and they were like, hey, what's going on? Why are you guys doing this? And really, if they would have just told them before they built the altar that they weren't building another altar to offer sacrifices to God on, they wanted to do what is here in Joshua 22:27, which just says, it may be a witness between you and us and our generations after this, that we might do service of the Lord before him with our burnt offerings and with our sacrifices and with our peace offerings, that your children might not say to our children in time to come, ye have no part. So really, they just wanted to make sure that since they were so far from the other tribes, that they weren't going to say that they had no right to worship in Shiloh at the tabernacle. And so it was, it seemed very innocent. The delegation that went to talk to them, that's like, okay, well, that makes sense. And they just went ahead and went on their way, and there was no more dispute. But if they would have just talked about it before they did all that, then all of that could have been avoided. So I thought that was a good lesson. The other thing is in Joshua 24:26, it says that they buried the bones of Joseph once they got into the promised land. That means that those bones were 40 years old and they carried them with them from Egypt. Like, oh, that is such dedication. And this is my good looking Joseph here. And I imagine that, you remember the Pilate's, the wife, was his name Pilate? No, I forget. Anyway, the master of the house, his wife was coming on to Joseph and he left his coat behind. So that looked like something that he could have just kind of slipped out of and got away from her before she really got him in trouble. It landed him in jail, but at least he didn't die. And he was let out of jail because he was using the gifts that God gave him of interpreting dreams. Okay, so this word here, Shechem, stood out to me as well. In Joshua 24:26, it says, the people said to Joshua, we will serve the Lord our God. We will obey him alone. So Joshua made a covenant with the people that day at Shechem, committing them to follow the decrees and regulations of the Lord. Joshua recorded these things in the book of God's instructions. As a reminder of their agreement, he took a huge stone and rolled it beneath the terebinth tree, beside the tabernacle of the Lord. So there's two things here. In the NLT, this is the NLT version. In the King James Version, this book of God's instructions is called the Book of the Law. In the King James Version, this terebinth tree, in some versions, it says oak tree because it's not translated as terebinth. And we're going to see that the terebinth tree is a very, very special tree. This place, Shechem, is very familiar because it was the place that the covenant was renewed. And if you remember that story of Dinah and her brothers, like the 12 sons of Joseph, when they came into Shechem, the prince of Shechem, so we have to, keep in mind that a place was a lot of times named after a person. So the prince of Shechem actually defiled Dinah, like raped her. And that place is the same place here that the covenant was renewed. Okay, so this is the translated oak, the terebinth tree. It is abundant in the Middle East, in North Africa, even in desert areas. It has an extensive root system, so it remains green even in times of drought. It is slow growing, but can attain heights 40 to 50 feet and develops a broad canopy. In the spring, the female terebinth trees have pink flowers and then produce small, oblong, fleshy fruit that is pink or ripens to blue. The seeds are edible, but not as commonly eaten as the cultivated pistachio, which is related but a different species of tree. Terebinth trees can live up to 1,000 years and are so resilient that even after being cut down, a new tree often sprouts from the stump. The majestic terebinth tree is known for its strength, resilience, tenacity, and endurance. No matter the conditions, this tree can survive and thrive, making it a symbol of perseverance and hope. I love that. So this book of Judges, it is a cycle of sin. They get rescued, they get in trouble. God raises up a judge to get them out of trouble. They have peace for 20 years or 40 years or 80 years, and then they go right back to the same thing, like over and over and over again. It is a period of 350 years. In some places I saw it said 200 years, some 300 years. It was a long time. There were 15 judges. There was one woman judge. And in that time, there was even a female assassin. So in Joshua 24:12, it says, "And I sent the hornet before you, which drave them out from before you, even the two kings of the Amorites, but not with thy sword, nor with thy bow." So that was the Lord saying, I need you to remember, or just you need to remember that I fought for you. It wasn't your strength, it wasn't your skill. It was me caring and fighting for you is the reason that that happened. That was the big theme in all of this. When the Lord would come upon someone and give them strength to do something, it was about the Lord being their king, the Lord fighting for them and leading them. But they rejected that over and over. He told them, don't intermarry with them, don't mention their names. But what did they do? They were living right among them, and they were influenced by them. They were actually taken over by the very people that they were supposed to be conquering. So this is the female assassin I was talking about, Jael. When Deborah was talking to Barak and saying, we need to go up and fight. And Barak was like, I'll go, but only if you come with me. And Deborah said, well, I'll go with you, but just know that the victory is going to be at the hand of a woman. Now, for years, I thought that was just Deborah saying that it would be her that everyone said the victory came through. But it was actually Jael, because she was the one who killed Sisera. Okay, so this is Judges 4:15-20. When Barak attacked, the Lord threw Sisera and all his chariots and warriors into a panic. Sisera leaped down from his chariot and escaped on foot. Then Barak chased the chariots and the enemy army all the way to Hazereth Hagoim, killing all of Sisera's warriors. Not a single one was left alive. Meanwhile, Sisera ran to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. Remember, the Kenites were the relatives of Moses' father-in-law, because Heber's family was on friendly terms with the king Jabir of Hazor. So he felt like this was a good place and a safe place for him. Jael went out to meet Sisera and said to him, come into my tent, sir. Come in. Don't be afraid. So he went into her tent, and she covered him with a blanket. Please give me some water, he said. I'm thirsty. So she gave him milk from a leather bag and covered him again. Stand at the door of the tent, he told her. If anybody comes and asks you if there's anyone here, say no. Well, surely Jael must have known there was a war going on, because, she offered her help to her friend, to the friend of king. But maybe this part about lying if somebody came didn't sit well with her or whatever. But she was actually the one who killed him. She was actually the one who killed him. So while he was there, she took a hammer and a tent peg and drove it through his temple. And they were oppressors. They were one of the oppressors, a Canaanite king of Israel. And there were many of them. There were many oppressors over and over. And when they would become oppressed and get in a bad way, then they would cry out to the Lord. But many times that they were crying out to the Lord, they was just crying out because they were in trouble, not because they had any interest at all in God Himself. It was just, okay, I'm in trouble. You need to come and help me because you want to be my God, so help. But after a while, God got tired of that, and He did not respond to them, and He would just turn them over to oppressors because it was like, a good parent, you have to get it through your children's heads somehow that this is the way that it is. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to highlight is this one here, which is Gideon. So he was one of the judges. Now, at first, Gideon was a weakling. When the angel of the Lord came to him the first time, and this was just so interesting to me, he was like, go, you mighty warrior, or something like that. The angel said to him. And Gideon was like, who, me? I could just imagine him saying that. But I'm from the weakest tribe. I am not at all a warrior. Lord, what do you mean? And then the angel of the Lord said, but I am with you. I am with you. So Gideon needed to remember or just think about, like we do, that if God says He is with us, then that's all we need to be able to muster the faith to go forward. So one of the battles for Gideon was when the Lord told him he had too many men to go and fight the Midianites. So God told him to say, like, okay, if you are afraid to go fight, then you can go home. So 22,000 of them, so a whole bunch of them left and went home. And they were just left with 10,000 men. And then the Lord was like, oh, that's still too many. And then He told them that He would take the men to the river, and whoever, watched the men while they were at the river, and the men that drank one way, He let those men stay in the troops, and then the other men, you could send them away. He ended up with just 300 men. And I read somewhere that in ancient warfare, there was one torch bearer per 30 or 20 men. So if you know the story or you listen to the soundtrack, you remember that they surrounded the enemy. Gideon and his 300 men surrounded the enemy, and each one of them had a torch and each one had a pot. And so Gideon told them, when I say so, do what I do. So at the time that they were surrounded, he hit the pot and he broke the pot and lit did the torch, and they started shouting. So if this was true, that there was, one torch bearer per 300, the Midianites probably thought there was way more than 300 out there. So in Judges 7:2, we see, and the Lord said unto Gideon, the people that are with thee are too many for me to give the Midianites into your hands, lest Israel vaunt themselves against me, saying, mine own hand have saved me. And that vaunt just means boast. So God was saying, I am I want you to know that it was me who gave you the victory. And you got too many men for me to do that. If you take all those men in there, then you're going to think that you did it. And I'm the one that's going to fight this fight. So they won with 300 men. Okay. So this is what the land boundaries are still looking like. All right. And of course, we are still this chart hadn't been updated since last week, so that's still the same. And we're still in the period before we get to King David, but we're getting closer. And that is it that I have on the slides there. But the thing I want to say before we end is I just had to really think about calling this broadcast a show, because I'm really like a person who really values authenticity, and I just didn't like the word. Other people around me, my darling calls it that, but so I started calling it a sharing. It's a sharing because that's really what I want it to be. But I just don't know a lot of people who just like talking about the Bible as much as I do. So that is the community I want to be a part of. Not a community that's about, tearing people down and pointing out people's faults and telling them where they've gone wrong. We have enough of that. We do enough of that to ourselves. So I want to study and talk about just the Word of God. So this is a sharing. It is not a show. I love that. I just really, really love that. Okay. So that is what I have for this week. And I really do have to tell you, it is such a job to pick only a few things because there's so much. I mean, there were stories in, Judges especially with Gideon and his family and him having, a concubine with that one son, and, him killing 70 brothers and one getting away and they run off, wanting to be king, and there was just so many things. So the Bible is inexhaustible. And, all we can do is just depend on the Holy Spirit to lead us into the things that we need to be consuming right now and to the lessons that we need to realize right now. Because a lot of the stuff that just really hits me hard, it's stuff that I can use right now in my life. And we're just so grateful for that. So, with that in mind, we continue to integrate never-changing truth with ever-changing technology. And may the Lord watch between me and thee while we are absent one from another. Lord willing, see you next week.